Thanks everyone for joining us, including those people online. There's several of you, and we are recording this meeting. My name's Ken Donnelly, for those who may not know me, and I'm the chair of this committee. We're going to go around and introduce ourselves in a second here. I know the councillors and Mark, you know this system very well. I was just, Shalina was nice enough to inform me that we need to talk into the microphones. So when we do talk, we have to turn our microphone on. Otherwise, those people that are joining us remotely are not able to hear us. So, and it wouldn't be recorded. So perhaps we can just go around this way, starting with you, Mark.
Hi, Mark Phillips. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the municipality.
Dwayne Cross, Manager of the Highway Planning and Design Group, Nova Scotia Public Works.
Lyle Russell, Project Engineer for Department of Public Works.
Mark Brace, I'm the Planning Engineer for the project with Public Works.
And Bob Pett, Senior Environmental Scientist with Public Works.
Jim Ivey, Councillor, West Hants Regional Municipality.
Dave Crouchman, just basically a citizen member.
Sheldon Hope, the Vice Commodore at Pisiquid Canoe Club.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go through and ask the people that are joining remotely. And I'm just going to start at the top of the screen, and I'm going to start with you, Sonia, and then I will go next to Alex Wilson.
Sonia Wood, Chair of the Friends of the Avon River.
And after Alex, it'll be Darren. Go ahead, Alex.
Hi, everyone. Alexander Wilson, Senior Water Resources Engineer, part of the CBCL team.
Great. And Darren, and then Mark McLean. Okay, thanks, Darren. Mark.
Hey, Mark McLean, District 3 Councillor, West Hants Regional Municipality.
And Rick Griffin, and then Graham.
Yeah, hi, Rick Giffen. I'm a Senior Civil Engineer with CBCL Limited, working on the project.
And Graham.
Hi everyone, Graham Matheson. I'm an environmental analyst with the Nova Scotia Department of Agriculture. And I just wanted to mention that Scott Noss, our Executive Director, will be joining at 7:30.
Thank you. And is there anybody else that I can't see on the screen? Shalina?
Colin Hines?
Colin, okay. No, haven't got you, Colin.
Hi there, Colin Hines, a member of the Liaison Committee from Falmouth. I'm traveling home from New Brunswick, so I'm going to be listening on the phone. Thanks.
Thanks, Colin. And Shalina?
Oh, Shalina Thornton.
Shalina Thornton, Municipal Operations Supervisor and Emergency Management Coordinator with West Hants.
I'm laughing because Shalina and I made an agreement that if I forgot to tell somebody to turn on the microphone, she would step in. She's my backup. But so anyways, okay, that's great. Thanks everyone for joining. We do have some more people that are coming in. I know Shelley Bibby has a meeting is in a meeting that's should have just ended at 6, and she's rushing over. And we may have some other people joining either online or here. We've got a presentation like we have had for the last several meetings. We're going to be recording this, and like usual, I will try and get this onto the website as quickly as possible after the meeting, probably by tomorrow, and given how long it takes to get the video straightened out. I just want to mention that the recording of these has actually worked out quite well. I haven't looked in a while, but the last meeting was around 180 views from the community, so it makes it more accessible. And I think having the actual video of the meeting is more accurate than writing minutes. and it's very accessible. It also reduces the need for somebody who wants to come and listen but are concerned about some of the COVID or some of the other things that are flying around these days. They know that they don't have to come, they'll be able to see it. So given that, as I said, we're going to start off with the presentation as we have been for our last few meetings. So I'll turn it over to Mark Brace, who's going to be kind of quarterbacking the agenda and the lineup of speakers.
Yeah, I've got all the slides, so I'm kind of behind that. So welcome everyone. The latest meeting. I think we last met end of summer sometime. So just a brief overview. Like most of the meetings, a bit of a twinning update that Lyle's going to go through where the highway construction is today. There was an item brought up last time based on the Fort Edward report, and it was the burying island question. And Bob's going to go through some stuff on that. We followed up there. And then there's a bit of a presentation by CBCL. And I might have some input on the Abbotsford and Causeway upgrading. And then a bit of a, I don't think we have to wait till the end for questions, discussions. I mean, we can hop into that in each section as they come up. So I don't think we'll limit that to the end of the meeting. So first, I guess, Lyle, do you want to run your slides or?
Sure. I'll run
over.
No, take your chair.
Whatever way works.
All right. Here's the clicker. So this is pretty much the same drawing we show at the end of beginning of every meeting, just to kind of give you a reference again of what we're talking about. We basically broke this project up as always 3 sections. Generally section 1, which is east of 5A, the Windsor rail structure, is generally complete. You'll probably notice if you've been traveling in the area lately, the speed signs have been just recently changed from 90 to 110. So that's been fully commissioned and opened as of late last week. Section 2 is basically we're looking at the exit 6 area, the exit 7 area, and the causeway in between. And then section 3 is the far west and west of exit 7. So we'll just jump into those. So section, I guess, 2A is kind of from that Windsor Railway area to exit 6. There are some eastbound lanes there that are still kind of, you'll notice, still got a double yellow on it as you're heading eastbound. There's upgrading for that. We're hoping to get that this fall, but just with the amount of work that's been going on in the province, we've ended up pushing that to the spring of 2023. So we're going to go out and do some remedial work to try to make that a little more, we'll say, driver friendly. So we're going to go out and take that double yellow out and basically restripe it to make it a little more driver friendly for the winter and into the spring of next year. So that's kind of that section here that you can see I'm just kind of pointing to. So from exit 6 up to where that Windsor rail tunnel is. So section 2B is basically from exit 6 and exit 7, including the causeway. So we did do the final lift or the final preload fill along the causeway on August 18th. So that height you're seeing there now is it. So that would be close to what the finished highway grades will look like. It's actually maybe a little bit higher. We've actually surcharged it a bit to help accelerate the settlement. So that way when we do remove the rock fill and put in our gravels and asphalt, we won't see any net change in settlement because the gravels and asphalt's heavier than the rock. So we didn't want to see a increased settlement after paving. So it is a little bit higher, but that's pretty close to what the final grade through that section is going to look like. The exit 6 interchange, Nesbitt Street connector, we did start it this spring or this spring, late last fall. And we are looking and targeting and on schedule to be completed fall 2023. So we are really into like 8 months to go. and that will be done. The sanitary sewer line that runs under the highway and that was currently going through one of our abutments has been moved, and that piece of that sanitary line for the municipality has been moved, in service, and commissioned. We have completed the pile installation for the rail structure, as well as the south abutment for the highway overpass. We have actually completed the south abutment for the rail structure, and we are currently working on the MSE wall installations, some of the subgrade construction of the upper Water Street Nesbitt connector, as well as the westbound on-ramp. Some pictures here. So this is a picture from back this spring in April 2022, kind of just give you a quick site overview of what it looked like in April. Is that July, Bob? Well, it might be. So it might be July. I have
the same picture.
So yeah, so it's July. All right, so it's July. So well, that's just even better. This is going to look better then. So in July, this is what it looked like. So if we fast forward to yesterday, so this is the site yesterday. So same site, but what we're seeing here is that we've got the abutment installed for the south abutment is here. You'll see that the MSE wall construction is well underway. In the loop ramp is where we're doing the connector road and on ramp. So in a short period of time, there's been quite a bit of work since July, so that's not even 6 months. And here's where the actual ramp's going to be. So this ramp, the new eastbound off ramp, is basically connected or contained by MSE walls on either side. So that's kind of the exit 6 area. Moving into, I guess, exit 7 and west of exit 7. We've got kind of 2 projects on to go there. The first one being the actual highway, and we're looking at doing that connection and tying the new eastbound lanes in, and then follow up with some upgrading to the westbound lanes or the existing piece of highway that we're traveling on now. We are going to get the eastbound lanes open before the end of this year. So that's our main target right now, is to get that open, get that tied in, so that way traffic will be divided west of exit 7. Then in the spring of 2023, we will come back and do the upgrading to the westbound lanes. Similar to the other piece that I just mentioned around exit 6, we will plane out the yellow line, the rumble strip, and restripe it with proper lane markings to make it, again, driver friendly and more familiar for people traveling. Exit 7 interchange, well underway. It's been a long process to get where we are, but we are getting very close now. Spring 23, we will be done. The structure is just about done, but we're getting out of paving season for that area. So we will be pushed into spring 23 to kind of pave that and open and commission. So we do have the abutments, center pier, the girders and deck all on. We're working on the barrier walls, as well as we're getting the subgrade ready, and the westbound on and off ramp is being constructed. So just a few photos of that. So this is, again, I guess, July. So I got not April, but July. So this is what it looked like in July. So you can see where the 2 abutments were cast. And we were basically working on the center pier pile cap or pier cap. Fast forward to yesterday, we now have basically the girders are set, the decks on, and what the guys are working on are the barrier walls along the side. First casting of those will be tomorrow, weather dependent. And in this picture, you can also see the new westbound off ramp is here. The westbound on ramp will be over here. That's just a little bit up close of what the westbound off ramp is going to be. Again, not in its final configuration. This is an interim configuration until the new lanes across the causeway are built. Then the westbound off ramp will come along here and then tie in here. So this is just kind of an interim configuration. And this is the eastbound tie-in or westbound or west end tie-in, I guess I'm talking about here. So this is just where we're kind of already going from 4 lane down into 2 lane. So this is where that work is being done. You see here, the guys have basically got us widened. We got us extended. We're getting the gravels on. We're going to start grading up next week and move our rail. And with any hopes, we're hoping that not next week, but the following week we'll be paving, and potentially by the end of that week, I don't know the actual date, but we'll hopefully be opening this to single lane traffic and doing the cleanup before the holidays to get 4-lane open. And I guess that's it for, a construction update. So, I mean, I'll take, construction questions now.
Yeah, we might as well do questions first. We'll do them for anybody present here, and then we'll go to those joining remotely. Anybody have any questions for Lyle? Explained it too well, Lyle.
Listen, this is what I like.
Is anybody online? Perhaps you can put up your hand if you can do so, to signify if you have a question. Darren, I don't know I know you're on your phone. If you can't raise your hand from your phone, you can just unmute if you want to speak. So can you show the list of people present, and because if they do have hands up, it should be, yeah. Okay, no, not seeing any there either. So Lyle, thanks so much for that. It's really good to see all of that progress, and I was happy to drive through it a few times on my way down to Kings West High School for basketball tournaments this year. So so looks like Bob Pett's up next. Bob,
Rolling right in place. Okay, let's see. Go just. Okay. As we mentioned earlier today, at our last meeting, Darren Porton mentioned that there was a recent report out on Fort Edward commissioned by the West Hants Region Municipality, and it was noted that the Bering Island was in or near a construction site of ours. So I've looked at some of the reports we've done and tried to summarize some of this information in this presentation. Hopefully it won't be too long. I've learned a lot going through and looking through some of these really interesting pictures. This picture from July 21st that Lala had previously shown, and it's one day after our CLC meeting. We met on July 20th. And showing here, we're reconstructing exit 6, plus we're doing the Windsor Hants Railway alignment and a sewer line that was punched through, connect back up to where its outfall is, just off into the marsh proper. So what do we know about Bering Island? Dr. Jonathan Fowler in his report noted it, and this was a piece of artwork that he presented. It was actually the cover of a summary report that we commissioned him to do. That showed the whole picture, more than just the fort that he had on his cover from the original one. And you can see what it appears to be the Bering Island on this piece of artwork from 1753. I'm not sure if John Hamilton is the actual artist. I'm not sure if it says in there, but this is a interesting photograph from the National Library and the Nova Scotia Library, I guess, in this particular one. We also discussed this issue with our archaeology consultants that we've been working with the last few years, Davis McIntyre and Associates. And that issue about Bering Island was not identified in any of their previous reports or their previous discussions with the Micmac KMKO archaeology staff. So it's all new to us. So we wanted to look into this, and as I said, we commissioned Dr. Fowler to make a summary of what his comments and notes about the Bering Island. So As noted earlier in our CLC meetings, I'm a marine ecologist, oceanographer by training. And I'm trying to interpret this from a bit more from my slant and looking at the bigger pictures and more of a systems look rather than just smaller details, just like in the archaeology or some of the other bits. So I took note that Dr. Fowler recommended looking at a variety of maps and other imagery, including art over time, to really get a good idea of what's happening on the scene at different times through history. And for me, the British Admiralty chart, this is probably the earliest chart we have that actually has surveyed information about this area. And this map was produced in 1858. And the green images on this picture show salt marsh that was present in 1858. It shows some of the braided channel up through the Avon estuary. And I'm just going to flip this to the marker here. Down one pointer. It's tricky. It's easier than that screen. Near. Okay. So right down here is Windsor, and long time pre Causeway, we could see the whole area up around what's now called Dimmock Point, has a series of islands around, and then a very large marsh area, which sort of encompasses the Trugotha Creek area and other small creeks that come into this larger area. That area near the confluence of the two rivers, I'll hopefully say it properly in Mi'kmaq, the Pisiquid community, or not the community, sorry, what that area was called, was located near some 17th and 18th century Mi'kmaq village of Pisiquid. Hope I said that correctly. That was written up in some of our Davis and McIntyre and Associates reports that they did for us at 2019 and 2020. And they were looking at particularly the areas right along and adjacent east and west of the crossing area. And that's, say, from mid-19th century. And I'm going to work through some images that Dr. Fowler had, what DMA had, some images I found on, some additional images I found on internet, and so walk you through my story. So this is Jonathan Fowler's report, and a map, cadastral map, which is basically a property map from 1762. It was copied over in 1820, but this is the earliest map where we actually see an annotation on the map calling that area circled in red 9 Acre Island and burying ground. Don't know who was buried there, but there's some supposition, as we'll point out here, that it's potentially a Mi'kmaq burial site was on that location. See all around it, there's marshy areas. There's the three sort of islands that were shown, 3 or 4 islands that were shown on that 1858 nautical chart. We got one here where there's a large amount of houses now, and another site further to the east. I used to have the old Irving tanks and the like. Trugotha Creek was still fully tidal at that point in time. And all these lines are old property lines. And as we noted, as you may have noted on that original piece of artwork, it looked like that island was actively eroding by the currents in Pisiquid River, now the Avon River going right by. At that point in time, the Avon Channel was right along the now Windsor's town site It hadn't bumped over yet to the west side. It's a map approximately 20 years later, another cadastral map from 1785. And Dr. Fowler's report indicates shows this drawing that shows the Bering Island located here. And one of the important things that it shows in this map is the distance from the bottom of the toe slope of Fort Hill over to the edge of the river, 800 feet. And knowing this and all this orientation, it allows us to georeference to modern day imagery, including LiDAR, which he then goes on and shows in some of his further works, and that'll be coming up here. Here we superimpose, or Jonathan superimposed that old cadastral map on top of some aerial survey there in its correct orientation and the correct scale, and showing where it is relative to the fort up on top here. And this right here, it shows that 800 feet thing going from the bottom of the hill out to edge of the river. So this marks the location, the pretty close location of where that Bering Island was relative to current things. So it's right in that loop ramp of our interchange. He's also superimposed it on some LiDAR imagery of the site. And he's augmented the imagery here to show what the tide levels might have been at that time. And you can see the location of these islands. Islands of the Bering Island. This one, I don't know if it has a name, but it's right sort of the prominent point of Dimmock Point. Some people just call it the island, some are told. And then there's the other island here. This one also shows the current dike work. That's the horseshoe dike that it goes all around and joining up and protecting these areas here, including around the Bering Island. And that 800 foot thing indicator on the other map is basically helps us to tell where things are relative to a church site that was Acadian church that was on site from earlier in the 18th century. 1750, the church was demolished when they built Fort Edward. And I made a note there. Later in the 18th century, late 18th century, the maps then subsequently called it Shipyard Island. So that it's a Bering Island, it's a shipyard island. It's just showing some of and looks at some of the changes that we're going to see over time. Here we see it in that late 18th century map. They don't have the exact date on it, but it's now showing it named Shipyard Island. There's actually some of the very first dikes in the area here. These weren't Acadian dikes. These were dikes apparently by when the British were in power, and it may have been done by one of the original owners there, a Swiss fellow who grew up in France and was familiar with dikes and did some of the really earliest diking in the Windsor area here. So besides the natural wearing down of the island by erosion of the river, we've got dikes, dike work, new shipping activities, shipyard building going on in the area, starting the ground disturbance of that area, back 250 years or more. You can also see the semblance of a dike or some sort of structure on Gothic Creek, predecessor to the now Horseshoe Dike. This is Davis McIntyre and Associates. When they did the report in 2020, they had actually found some old wood beams and piles right along the edge of the current on-ramp to the Highway 101. And perhaps right on the edge of Bering and Ship Island. And we'll see some more about this coming up. Some other photos. I think this next shot just actually shows some of the archaeological finds that they did as they were fixing to start some of the additional causeway work and infilling on the wetland. You can see here number of wooden timber pieces all piled up. As they note in the report, it resembles a corridor road, but perhaps it was where ships may have lain on there, because it seems to be right along where in some of the next few photos you'll see was an old railway spur that also came into that area. You can see some of these old notched timbers that were in the site, pretty black from sitting in the mud for 100 odd years. Pier piling here. So we now move up into the 19th century. It's about 100 years later. Map that Dr. Fowler has in his report. We'll make this report available on our website as well. I haven't had a chance yet, but we'll also make sure that it goes over to the West Hants Historical Society as well. But you can see the location of the Bering Island. It's now called Bennett Smith's Shipyard, the road going through it. And you can see there's definite indication of seawalls or a pier along at this point. We see the old Windsor Annapolis Railway. It's pre the Dominion Atlantic Railway. So it's starting to see even more development in the area, and more disturbance. Found this on the website. I thought it was really great. It's a great picture for the town to have in this thing. I don't know how many people are aware of it, but it was on the Darwiki site. But so it's another piece of artwork from maybe a relative of Dr. Fowler. I'm not sure, but same last name, from 1878. And you can see this is the area where the ship Bering Island, that's, I made a typo there, and I missed in this particular version, but or Shipyard Island, whatever name you do want to call it. You can see what appears to be eroding banks of it, still in place in this particular representation. This is the area out on Colonial, pre-Nesbitt Street area, and Tugatha Creek, going back up in here, and the two railway bridges that were built later in the 19th or mid 19th century. I can't remember exactly when that was, but skipping along into the 20th century, the Geological Survey of Canada map. So again, it should be pretty well surveyed in, and you can see the area right in here, which is the Bering Island area. And now with the Dominion Atlantic Railway in there, there's even further work there. They put in a rail spur line going right along the edge of it, and perhaps some of those timbers where some things that Davis McIntyre had excavated. There's still a road in there. There's another spur line in here, but all this area is all former marshlands. There's still not much development in here because it's still looking pretty wet. And this might have been part of the dike system, or else it's just part of what's now the Colonial Road, Colonial Drive. We have a picture from 1929, and you can definitely see seawalls all along the edge of Bering Island, still visible. Out in front, you still see some foreshore marsh and mud flats. So this area hasn't been seen too much activity through those war years, and it's nothing too much left on there on Burial Island through all its shipbuilding and shipping kind of area works for the previous 100 years or so. Hipping up to 1945, just into the war kind of time frame. It just Davis McIntyre had in there showing where they found a georeferenced photograph, so they could show where the findings of those wooden timbers were, and they're lying right on top of that spur line and pier system where they were loading ships. Yeah, there. I just like to show this picture under another pre-causeway one from 1963. It's one of the few photographs I've seen that actually has at low tide shots. You can see the braided channels in the Avon River, and it's still pretty clear. You can see what's left of the burying island. It's fully diked in now through the system here, right around and then through to the Horseshoe Dike. There's a remnant marshy area here that is quite interesting. It's still there. Oops. That's my pointer here. No, didn't work. Good, there we go. Pushed the wrong button, okay. Did I jump too far? No, that's all right. Okay, so this is the next photo in line that I had from the 60s to the 1970s. This is just before opening. It's from one of our Nova Scotia Department of Highways annual reports. We've seen this before in some of the earlier CLC meetings, and you can actually see some timbers and the like that I believe that DMA found, because between 1970 and there's been some additional infilling along this edge to protect it. And it's interesting that it's an exact location of where we found some things. We don't know how old those are, but it's right on the edge of Bering Island, which would be right underneath here. It's difficult to tell if there's any in the surface is still left, given yet more construction and ground disturbance as we built the causeway and the new highway. Here we are back in July, and it's under reconstruction. So noted before, we've had a lot of disturbance on this island. It resembles, the island resembles some other bearing islands around this area and province that where they actually have archaeological evidence for Mi'kmaq burials. So it's possible that this area may have been a burial site, could have been one of those other islands. It's unclear. We've never been able to find any evidence of it. It's not saying it wasn't. But there is cultural memory of a burying area somewhere in this vicinity through discussions with Mi'kmaq. But with all the work that's been gone on over the last 250 years, we've never been able to find anything else. And with all the permanent infrastructure that we're building on in place here, it's unlikely we'll find anything else. I know when they excavated through to produce that sewer line, they were going through straight mud. There was never any indication of any granulars that might have been from an old island that might have been in place, so we haven't, it's unlikely we disturbed anything through any of this stuff. Because this whole area has been more or less covered with rock. Fair thickness, I don't know what kind of thickness Lyle on here now.
Well, 46 meters.
Yeah, so. Anyway, these are some additional shots that Lyle collected yesterday. And just another shot of the area looking north over exit 6. The location of the burial and shipyard. You can see the continued ground disturbance in that area, and it's pretty permanent now. And just another shot showing the 3 islands that we saw back in 1878 are still, we know more or less where they are, and there's definitive evidence for those islands in there. We're unclear if there was a burial ground there, but there's certainly a potential for it. But unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be possible to ever find any human remains on it, and nothing was ever noted in all the past developments in the area. So basically, we've been in conversation and provided information to Nova Scotia Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage. And more archaeological monitoring is going to be going forward as we're continuing work in this area. Additional work besides the highway work is going to be the tie-in of the updated dike system to the new road system. Davis McIntyre and Associates are going to be conducting that work under new heritage permits, so that information will be coming available, and those monitor results can be shared in future CLC meetings. So that's the presentation that I do to all see. I learned a lot. Hope you learned some things, and welcome for any questions.
Thanks, Bob. Very thorough and really interesting. Is anybody present here at the table have any questions for Bob? Oh, Jim, sorry, didn't see your light on, Jim.
Well,
I'm learning this system.
I was slow, delayed in putting it on, just thinking about the question. So thanks very much for the information, Bob. And I think especially given the conversation that we had at the last meeting, July 20th or thereabouts, that great to see the added research going in here and appreciate the information being passed along. I think that's really quite important. One comment that you had made early on when you were looking at exit 6 there, and you'd identified the sewer line that had been re-established there. So I'm not sure if this is you or if it's Mr. Russell that deals with it, but you'd made the comment that it continuing through there to the marsh proper. I just wasn't sure about that because I don't know that that goes through to the marsh, does it? Or is it going, did you mean to the pumping station? Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to be clear on that because we've had quite a bit of discussion here about that. So I just thought it was important to ask it just to get clarity. So thank you very much. Oh,
sorry.
Do you want me to ask the question again?
No,
Okay.
I was just agreeing. I just forgot to put my mic on and nobody reminded me.
Yeah.
You said it just for me.
Absolutely.
Yes. It does go to the pumping station and then off to the marsh.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to have that follow-up, isn't it, after that discussion in that last meeting. So sorry to be distracted, but Liz Galbraith was just asking for a link and I don't think we can get her one. So any other questions for Bob? Okay, so we'll go to the people out in the ether. Anybody that that has joined, or any of you have any questions from your remote stations? Just put up your hand. Not seeing any, we'll move on, Bob. Thanks very much for that. And Mark, who's up next?
So up next, I don't know if we want to run it from here or if someone from CBCL wants to share their version of the presentation, but we're going to have a update on the Abateau and Causeway upgrade from our consultants at CBCL.
Yes, hi Mark, this is Alex. I was going to ask you the same question. So, this seems to work, so if you're okay with this, I can ask you to just follow the slides.
Yeah, I can advance them unless you wanted to point at anything on your end and wanted to share, but either way works for me.
Yeah, I think this should be okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Melissa Rutherford sends her regrets. She was not able to attend today. She would normally present this this part. She's asked me to do this on her behalf. I will do my best. Please bear with me. All right, so we'll start with the recap of the project, really focusing on the Abateau itself, and we'll go into a little bit more detail about the different aspects with the design and its current status. Very similar to what we presented the last meeting. So I'll just go through this. So primary objectives, always important to remind ourselves about them, include enhanced flood protection and climate change resilience to protect against flood risks and vulnerability to sea level rise, coupled with the need to protect critical public infrastructure, communities, and valuable agricultural land. Also, related to public safety is improving highway safety through the completion of Twinning Highway 101 across the Avon River, while also benefiting from the enhanced flood control system to protect the highway and associated bridges. So the structure and the associated dike system is downstream of the highway bridges and provides flood protection to those structures. Next slide, please. Right, other requirements. As you know, in addition to meeting public safety objectives, this project must also satisfy regulatory requirements, which include fish passage in compliance with the Fisheries Act and environmental assessment conditions from Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, including consideration of potential impacts to asserted or established Mi'kmaq, Aboriginal, or treaty rights, as well as minimizing environmental and societal impacts through obtaining applicable permits and authorizations, satisfying several EA terms and conditions. Next slide, please. So this is the project site. You're all very familiar with it, but just to, again, look at it from maybe more a hydraulic perspective. So in blue, we have the path of the water, which is diverted slightly from its original path, but rejoins the path of the Avon River as soon as it naturally can. So you see in yellow the realigned twinned highway, and in green is the protection system, the dike and structure that protect the highway. As Lyle mentioned earlier on, the highway is at a slightly lower elevation, and beside this, there's going to be the existing highways is lower elevation, and the fill is now at higher elevation, very close to its finished elevation, and that will continue on to the dike, which separates from the highway and then connects to the new proposed structure, and connects to the higher ground further on. So this is the protection system. Next slide, please. So you've seen this slide before. It just shows the overall project, how the if you see letter A, which points to the proposed causeway and the protection system around the Avon River causeway here, and how that relates to the overall highway twinning project. Next slide, please. Right, so again, we've done a little bit of rendering. This shows in a little bit more realistic manner rendering of the proposed highway twinning and the dike system with the proposed structure. So we see in blue the Lake Pisiquid area, which is now extended towards the proposed structure. And you see the proposed structure in white there, and just downstream of that, the dissipation pool and the channel that will allow it to reconnect with the existing channel. And there's also a little rendering showing water going through it, just to get, again, a little bit of a sense of what this looks like. This might look like. The project is still, being reviewed, so still potential to be changed. Next slide, please. Right, so we were asked, I think a couple of meetings ago, to provide cross-section of the existing new causeway and potential future berm with some elevations and water levels. So we can see the existing causeway. Lowest point along that is 8.9 meters. This compares to the current high tide level, highest annual tide of 7.7 meters. So we're getting very close. And when you add storm surges on that, you're getting even closer. So with sea level rise, that causeway elevation is not able to provide necessary flood protection. So looking at projections for future sea level rise, we get up to 12.5. And when you add up the uncertainty in potential future projections with wave heights and storm surges, you get up to 13.5. This is why the proposed protection system goes up to elevation 14, which is about 5 meters higher than the existing causeway. And this provides protection right up to the year 2100. By any means, feel free to ask any questions any moment if there's any uncertainty about anything I'm showing. Next slide, please. Right, this is another section I think that was requested, showing a little bit more closely the structure with some internal gate water level control systems and how that relates to the proposed bridges of the twinned highway. So we see essentially starting from the ground, the bottom elevation is at -5 meters. That matches the bottom of the existing structure. And then we go down a little further from that to allow water to flow more efficiently down to -6.5 at the bottom end. And that connects to the downstream energy dissipation pool, which will be at -8.5, just to allow some room for all that energy to be dissipated without eroding the bottom and damaging the side slopes. And then once that energy dissipated, this connects back to the natural river bottom elevation, which is around -5, and then further continues to go down from there. Important elevations in there are what we call the typical, or I guess prior to the DFO order to open the gates, it was at elevation 2.12, and this proposed structure has 2 sets of gates. So the first one, where you see the water levels stop, is where the active gates, so they're controlled by a computer, you're able to go up and down as needed to regulate water levels in or out as needed. This is very flexible. And then the second set of gates, just downstream of that, is an additional protection. And those are essentially flap gates. They're just big steel gates attached with chains. And they're just meant to protect in case we have a completely passive system. This is another one of the options where we wouldn't use a computer and we just allow those gates to function like normal tide gates. When the tide rises, it would close those, and the tide goes down and the water on the other side would push them open and drain out. So it has all these different types of water control within, and allows that flexibility for managing the system in whichever way will be approved by the regulators. Next slide, please. Right, so here, this is the concrete of the structure, right from the structural design. It's a little bit difficult to imagine what it looks like. I don't know if from where you are, you're able to click on the link and open the viewer itself.
I don't know if I want to risk that one, Alex.
Yeah. I mean, you've seen that we show it every time, so just pan through it. Essentially, what you see in the front there is the upstream side, and the walls around it to smooth the entrance of the water, to make it to avoid rapid acceleration of the water, so the fish don't get spooked, and they can enter and exit smoothly from the fishways. And you see some walls, vertical walls sticking out there. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Mark. And this is to again separate the flow from the main central area, which can go quite fast, from the flow within the fishways, which is meant to go as slowly as possible to maximize fish passage. And it's a similar thing on the other side, the walls around it to smooth the entrance. There's no roof. The only covered part is for the access road, to allow as much sunlight to go through, which again helps the fish don't feel scared by the darkness. So this structure is designed more for fish passage, I would say, than other considerations. The size of the central channels is sized for flood protection, to make sure there's enough capacity to drain the flood events. But most of the effort in the structure has certainly been put into fish passage. That's what we spent most of our time studying in the last few years, and it's still ongoing work. Next slide, please. Right, regulatory approval status update. So I'll note about Nova Scotia Environment, Climate Change, Environmental Assessment, Transport Canada, and DFO approval status. And there's a couple of little renderings of the structure, again, to be able to visualize a little bit what is being considered, and seeing water going in and out. It's a very large structure, and with quite a lot of capacity for water moving in and out. And you can see the downstream dissipation pool, and any other protection around it would be covered with vegetation. So there's some riprap for energy dissipation around the structure, but that's going to be covered with topsoil and vegetation, because it still allows the protection to happen. But then, since there was certainly interest in having the slopes vegetated by the Mi'kmaq, this is something that we made a point of including. Next slide. Thank you. So Nova Scotia Environment, Climate Change, Environmental Assessment Protection Project Description Update. So in June 2017, the Highway 101 Twinning 3 Mile Plains to Falmouth project received approval with conditions. NSECC requested additional information on the changes to the project, specifically on the Abueto structure. And then Nova Scotia Department of Public Works provided an update to the environmental assessment in April 2022 to describe the advanced engineering design and operational abilities of the Oboto structure, the context and rationale, and a directed assessment of environmental effects related to the design changes that have evolved since the initial evaluation of the 2017 EA. So Nova Scotia Environment Climate Change is still reviewing the document, and a consultation with the Mi'kmaq is ongoing. With regards to Transport Canada, the original application submitted in December 2020, updated design drawings was provided by Nova Scotia Department of Public Works in April 2022, and Transport Canada is still reviewing the document, essentially waiting for DFO approval and the consultation to be completed. And this consultation with the Mi'kmaq is currently still ongoing. And with DFO, the original application was submitted in November 2020, which originally focused on the freshwater lake operating scenario. In March 2021, DFO responded the application was incomplete/inadequate and requested additional information focused on other operation scenarios that included tidal exchange. So we worked on this, and in August 2021, a supplemental information package was submitted to DFO. Since then, there are several meetings since August to review and discuss that information and subsequent analysis to address DFO's comments. So they had further comments after that. To answer those, further modeling and assessments were submitted in June 2022 to address those DFO comments and provide confidence New Oboto will function and accommodate fish as best as it can. And in October 2022, just last month, DFO responded with another list of questions requesting additional information focused on other operating scenarios, additional focus on sediment, and additional questions about different options for fishways. So this is where we are now, working on trying to address those additional questions. And so next steps, responding to those DFO comments, which are quite consequent, continuing a pre-construction monitoring program, spring 2023 through 2024, tender ready for construction start, potentially spring 2023, and DFO regulatory approvals to be determined. We'll answer the questions first and see where they go with this. Construction to be determined 2 to 3 years, and then initiate post-construction monitoring program to be determined, but will last 5+ years. Continuing consultation with Mi'kmaq ongoing, no end date proposed, and engagement with the community liaison committee as we are doing right now. This is ongoing. Thank you very much. That's completes my section.
And I guess, Alex, I should just add on that spring 2023, that's assuming that nothing big comes up, that basically what we have proposed now with the new information is acceptable, and we're not going back and redesigning foundations or anything like that. That would obviously push us out further.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Alex. Does anybody have any questions? Shelley?
Thank you. What's the pre-construction monitoring program? What is being monitored, and who is facilitating that, or is it more than one thing that's being monitored?
I'm probably not the best person to answer this. Maybe I'll let.
Yes, Bob here. Department's looking after that a number of different ways and different teams. We're looking at changes in fish populations and movement through the system. We're looking at water quality. looking at marshes both inside and outside the system through other teams.
I guess I'm kind of curious who the teams are.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Well, the fish assessments, pretty large team, the same team that has been going on for the last few years, led by Darren Porter, MCG, CMM, Mi'kmaq Group, and Katie University through Dr. Trevor Avery leading that. Plus, we have CBCL is continuing some oversight on our behalf. So that's the sort of the fisheries team. CBCL is also going to be looking at water quality and suspended sediments and temperature salinity, those sort of basic kind of things through the system, including groundwater. And then we have CB West and St. Mary's University Transcoastal Adaptations looking at marshes and mudflats, both upstream and downstream of the system.
okay, how would the teams that are monitoring, how are they selected or approved or yeah, I guess that's the question. Was that just not to take anything away from Darren Porter monitoring the fish, but Darren's been monitoring the fish for a long time. And I guess in the spirit of objectivity or of having, and maybe Darren's the only person in his team are the only ones who can do that. But sometimes I would look to outside resources or additional objective, not that I'm saying that Darren's not objective, but I'm just kind of curious about that.
Well, the team and is working closely with DFO to ensure that we're getting everything surveyed and studied as to meet DFO's requirements for a monitoring plan. Really, it makes sense to continue with a team that's looking at it from sort of the two-eyed seeing approach. We have academic partners with it. It's basically we're continuing that team approach that we've been going on since 2017. So it makes the most sense, at least in the way we're thinking. So I have no real plans to change on it. We have CBCL doing some oversight as necessary. DFO may have its own independent oversight. If it's deemed necessary, we can look at other forms of partnerships through our situation. We've also had some discussions with Forest Title Group because of their great experience in monitoring just further downstream and giving us a hand when we have difficult issues with the high currents that are in this area.
Jim, looks like you might have a question there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Just kind of get my thoughts here together. Even though a lot of it's still some of the same information, there's still a lot there. I have one question, if I can just interject and maybe get Lyle to respond. It had to do with the construction, Lyle. I don't think I heard you going into 2024 on the construction piece, or did I miss that when I was making notes? Your plan of the construction completion, you took us through exit 6, the interchange, section 2A and B, and over into exit 7. And just in going through that, did you land in 2024 still doing construction, or can you?
No, 100%. So basically, yeah. So the highway upgrading outside of the causeway upgrades between 6 and 7 will be currently slated to be completed at, let's say, October 2023. And then what spills into 2024 is when we get into the upgrading of the dikes, potential Abateau and the causeway. But outside of that, we will be done 2023.
Great, thank you. And the reason I'm asking that question, just to kind of get that out here, is because on the slide we have up here now, assuming that we've got Abateau design construction approved, and I think you're saying approval in the spring. Am I correct on that? You're expecting still another 4 or 5 months?
So probably our response back to DFO's questions is going to take a few months to generate, just with the amount of work there.
Right.
We're hoping to coordinate with DFO early on to try to make sure that's acceptable and shorten their approval timelines.
Mhm.
But we really don't have any control over how long they take. So assuming everything goes perfectly,
Hmm.
we would be ready to tender for spring, but like DFO's approvals may push us later in the year, but we're hopeful to get something started then.
Got it. Thank you. And so the point I'm going to connect on that, and I'm going to loop back a little bit here, but is that the construction timeframe up here on the Abato looks to be a 2 to 3 year process. Is that, am I understanding what's up there correctly, or am I misreading the slide?
No, yeah, that's right. That it's a pretty significant one. I think 2 is probably ambitious if we start later in the year. So it's likely several years to get that built.
Right. So that then still impacts respectfully through to Mr. Russell's comments that 24 could spill over to 25, 26. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to think it out loud in my voice here.
Yeah, so not to speak for Lyle, but I think
Are we-
the current work outside the Abato that isn't reliant on those approvals
Mhm.
will basically be wrapped up.
In 2023.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we would need those approvals to start work on that section.
So we would still have this piece, I'll call it in the middle or at the end of the causeway with the Abato work still needing to be done. Am I correct in saying that, or? I'm just being very cautious with my words here. I don't want to.
No, for sure. So, yeah, so basically exit, let's say east of exit 6 will be twinned for new 4-lane highway. West of exit 7 will be twinned new 4-lane highway. Between 6 and 7 across the existing causeway by fall of 2023 will be divided with a concrete, precast concrete Jersey barrier to provide division there, but correct. So that piece between 6 and 7 is subject to approvals and all that stuff. And then that will spill into that work will be, assuming we get 2023, it will be 3 years out before we'll actually make that final highway connection.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of parse that out because connecting the dots here. So, so thank you for that. So when I look back at us having started this with the initial primary priorities, and I don't want to control them, hold on to the mic here too long, but I've got quite a few here, just try and nail up. 2017, flood protection, safety issues at the fish passage. And back then it was looking at us still looking to try and maintain a lake initially, which I think they were probably a couple of the early options that came off the table because they weren't able to get fish passage with that. I think those were options A and B, if I'm correct in that early assessment. And I'm going to kind of pause and let you, either I'm right or I'm wrong, but
I don't remember the exact lettering,
Hmm.
but definitely the initial application to DFO was modeling based around a freshwater lake scenario. And that was one of the requests to come back and provide the information on the other scenarios to them. Yeah.
great. So with what we have in front of them now, that is no longer pursuing a freshwater lake scenario. Am I correct that that's no longer part of this design, that it's?
So it's still possible with the design.
Mhm.
It seems unlikely that DFO is going to approve that, considering that that was in front of them and then they asked for these other scenarios, right?
Got it. Thank you very much for that. And so the other thing, I guess the other 2 points I'll touch on that came up in the presentation, and I'll cede the mic to anybody else, that the initial approvals in 2017 were done with an environmental assessment that was based on refurbishment, I believe, of the pre-existing gate structure that's there. And then the changes took place subsequent to 2017. That was 2018, 2019, when option D showed up, and we've gone through this path that we're in presently. I think another environmental assessment was referenced in our July meeting, and we were asking, was that a public one, or was it just one that was being done in-house to see where things were? Because you have a totally different structure in place now than what was being looked at, what is 5 years ago now. So that environmental assessment, though, is still subject to or being reviewed. So there's another, I guess, a block in the timeline here that we're still waiting to get clearance on. Am I correct in that?
Sure, it's Bob here. Nova Scotia Environment has indicated that another assessment is not required. The approvals for continuing on are all dependent on existing regulatory pathways through DFO. And so no further EA is required. There's going to be additional terms and conditions put on our existing approval
Mhm.
And we're waiting to hear from those.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And similar in parallel, there was also the application to Transport Canada. Same thing. They've done a re-review, I think, beginning last April based on the presentation that you're still waiting to hear back from Federal Department of Transportation. It's federal, I believe, for their approvals on the crossing of the channel. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, my understanding is that there's probably not much concern there. They're basically looking for DFO to sign off, and then their approval will basically follow that.
Great, thank you.
There is one other approval that wasn't marked on here, and that's Nova Scotia Environment's second wetland alteration approval for work on the Ellicott Marsh. So that's also, and until we have a final design, we're waiting, we'll be waiting on that approval as well.
Got you. For the Ellicott Marsh. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Bob. Appreciate it. Just let me check my notes here.
While you're checking there, I just wanted to indicate there is another next step. It may not be associated directly with this project, but it's a necessary next step. And it'll probably come through DFO regulatory approvals. We have to figure out what we're doing with the old causeway. It will remains a barrier to fish.
Absolutely. And actually, when you were presenting there and you were talking about the more open nature of what you have built into this new design, I was wondering about that because it's a complete covered passage through that, and the fish are still going to need to get through that channel, I'm assuming, in some fashion, or would that be ripped out altogether and turned into an open channel, or that's unknown at the present time?
It's still unknown what the minimum would be, taking off the entire gate structure and leaving the other remaining tunnel in place, but that's still under discussion.
Okay, thank you. And so I guess, so kind of the conclusion here is that we may still have what appears to be a 100 series highway with construction taking place through a segment of it. I won't try to define what that length is going to be, but it's going to involve maybe 100 feet, 100 meters on each side of where that abateau structure would end up going. Am I correct about that? That we'll still have that construction type zone along this highway?
So pretty much from exit 6 to exit 7, the new lanes are separate from the existing ones. So pretty much that section would look to be reconstructed in future, like where all that infill is. That's the whole highway shifting there. So it's basically a kilometer-ish long zone.
So we'd still be using the existing highway until you get these approvals, till you get that abateau in before you can start actually nailing down the asphalt on that segment. Am I correct in that? That's our 2 to 3 year out segment. I don't want to misstate this.
Yeah, we'll need to build the bridges there to connect that piece to get the highway traffic over. So that's all dependent on this. It would be 2-3 years timeframe.
EA approval, transportation approval, marsh approval, and DFO approval. All in that sequence, am I right?
I think the DFO approval is the most difficult one.
It probably is based on where we've been so far, that we're 5 years down the line. Not saying that to be critical, just saying that we're on a long path here in trying to get to a common place for that safety, the flood protection, and the fish passage. So
There is no EA approval. I mean, it is approved, but the new conditions.
sorry. Thank you, Bob, for the correction of that. I appreciate it. Thank you. I'll cede the mic for now if anybody else wants to.
Thank you. Anyone else present at the table with questions? Yeah, sure. So Jim, maybe we'll go online, and then if we can always come back to you, right? Okay. So I see Darren's hand up. And I see Mark McLean. So let's do it in that order. That I saw Darren's first. Darren, do you want to go ahead? You'll have to unmute. Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yes.
All right, just take a moment, unfortunately, to defend myself a bit. Just to clear the record, in 2017, this committee, CLC, voted or advised and or whatever, myself, Bob, Pat, to put together a project. We did so for 2 years, 17 and 18. Any other work that was done wasn't done to the province until this year. So I found the funding and or Mi'kmaq Conservation Group found the funding. And or I bore the brunt of that myself at my own expense. As for 2022, there still is no contract signed. I am still not being paid, and my line of credits are taxed to $70-some thousand, which is none of anybody's business. But when somebody comes after my living and singles it out in a public meeting such as this is recorded on the record, I will put that out there. It is unfortunate that that's the case. CBCL, CB West, Big Mall Conservation Group, K University, not singled out, but Darren Porter was. The work being done now this year, I'm carrying that on at my own risk. I'm at risk of not being paid, but I don't want this project to be stalled because it is required, I believe, to have 2 years monitoring prior to a highway being twinned. So if I say I'm not going to do this because I'm not getting paid, it will be stalled and public safety will be at risk. That is on me. I am the safest operator, the most knowledgeable operator on that river, and I don't write the studies. I actually drive the boat, keep people safe, and add my local knowledge to it. So, to be fair, let's be fair. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll just leave it there. The question I want to ask, I want to thank Bob, Pat, for the great presentation on Burial Island. It was very respectful, very well done. And I have a question. Councillor Ivy asked some very good questions. And he covered most of the things that I would have asked myself. I'll try to speed this up. I believe what I heard, Bob, is in October of this year, DFO and you communicated to the province that you didn't make the mark or whatever that was put on the screen. I'm sorry, I'm a little rattled here. And you guys have put together very quickly from October to end of November, a new option. Is that correct?
So it's Mark here. I don't think we've put together a new option. CBCL has basically looked at the questions that were asked and kind of created a list and proposed how to start answering those questions. Like there's not, that work isn't complete. It's just a roadmap essentially that we're looking to take to DFO and discuss with them to say, does this proposal meet your needs? Is this what you guys are looking for, right? To make sure we're achieving what they were looking for.
So this is a concept then that we're seeing tonight. Is that correct?
So this is basically the ongoing Abito concept. DFO is looking for more information, some more modeling, some different options. I don't think this concept has really materially changed much. And although Alex or Rick, correct me if there's something being proposed there.
Hi, yes, at this point, well, we're going to do our best to answer the questions. We haven't started working on anything yet, but it doesn't feel like they're going to ask for a completely new option, but essentially more information about things that have already been discussed, more information so they can understand better things we noted here, the flows, the sediment, and contingency in case the currently proposed fishway doesn't work as well as intended. Those are the main.
Because I thought it looked like it was at a different location, a bit closer back to the original structure. Has that changed? Because I mean, our fisheries concern from a commercial fisheries point is it's displacing us. But tonight, when I seen those maps, it looked like you guys had pulled it back. Some, is that just the artist rendition? It's not accurate, or what is going on there?
Yeah, no change at all. Maybe
okay.
It's just those views that are more like you say artistic than accurate. But no, they're generally representative. But if something looks different, it's just looks that way. It's not nothing's been changed. Nothing's been
changed. Last question. You had mentioned the flap gate. I don't remember that being in option D. Is that something I just misunderstood?
it's just a place to put a flap gate if we go there. There could be flap gates if we decide to make the whole thing completely passive, or partial flap gates. It's just a place to put them if that's an option that is considered. That's all.
All right.
We really don't know what this will end up like at this point, so it's as flexible as it can be. That's essentially the where we are now.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Darren. Mark McLean.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know who can answer this question, but I'm just curious what kind of price tag would be on this concrete structure for the Arbitro? Is there a budget proposed for it, or just curious, just some rough numbers?
I think we're still waiting on detailed estimates. And I mean, if things are still in flux, it's hard to say exactly, but it's certainly not cheap. The project would basically include the two bridge structures, the highway twinning, dike work, the Abateau. So it's tens of millions, I would say, in as a rough estimate.
Okay, so they're gonna bulk all this infrastructure all together without Arbitro. They're not gonna break it out with the Arbitro cost. What would the infilling costs, and what would the other two concrete structures for the, I guess they'd be bridges, I guess, for the highway, what they cost?
Yeah, so that would all be broken down in the estimate, but at this stage, I'm kind of looking at this section of the project's kind of all dependent on that approval. And so that's kind of the scale I've been looking at it, but I'm sure, you know, CPCL is going to be generating detailed estimates down to the rebar, right?
Okay, just sort of curious, what do those two overpasses cost, the ones that are going to be going over for the highway?
The bridges over the water here?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you offhand, to be honest. I'm not a bridge engineer. We'd have to look into that, I think.
Okay.
We can try and get back to you on that, Mark.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else, Mark?
No, that's now.
Okay, great. Thank you. There aren't any other hands showing remotely. That did you have one, or Jim? All right, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess probably my last one of the night, and I didn't get notation, but it seems to me at one point in time during the presentation, it may have been Alex that was talking to it, but I'm not sure if I'm going to hammer through to the panel here, but had to do with the depths of the water that I think I was hearing. And I'm not sure if I heard, I don't even want to quote the number because what I think I heard doesn't seem to make sense, but were we getting to discuss what kind of depths of water we would actually see in the basin, given that we've gone from what was a lake appearance there that we had prior to any work being done, and now we're down to what is basically a creek that's flowing through there with the flow of water in and out. Any sense as to what we'll end up with by way of water in that basin based on what we have here with the design that's in front of us now?
I can answer that. Essentially, at this point, since we don't really know how the structure will be operated, we cannot estimate at all what this might look like, because there's a range of options from the typical lake level that we show there on the diagram to down to the low flow creek that's there now, and anywhere in between, with some constant levels, with some varying ones. Right now, what we're trying to do is to identify what option is most favorable for fish passage and answer the DFO questions. And depending on all the information that's produced and how it's interpreted by DFO, any scenario could come out as the preferred one at this point. We really don't know.
Yeah, the structure can operate in that full range. all the way up to that height down to, the creek level, and DFO's asking for additional information on more scenarios. So we're pretty reliant on what they're gonna permit.
I was just going to add, it's Bob here, that the low flowing creek, it's a tidal, it'd be a tidal creek, so it's going to fluctuate through the two tides of the day. So it's going to be small, but it's also going to get quite large, allowing the maximum amount of water that's allowed under whatever operational structure, if we go that particular route.
Good, thank you, Bob. And can I try and pen you in just a little bit on what that highest possible number might look like? Would that get to be, and I don't, like, if it's not possible, then that's all right, but will it get to be like it was previously with that, what we'll call that lake-like appearance? Or is that beyond the realms of possibility with what we have here with this structure? And I'll tell you the reason for asking this question, or why I'm going down this line at the present time, my closing questions, which I thought might only be one, but I've made it a couple, is the one thing that we're hearing within the community is that nobody's satisfied at all with what they're seeing now. And I think I'm safe in saying that. I can't pretend to speak for everybody. But virtually anybody that I talk to, period, is not happy with what they're seeing now. And so that's the reason we're asking the question is, what can they expect to see if we continue down this path with this structure? And I guess it's a bit disappointing that I don't want to pick on words here, but that we don't know what it's going to look like because we don't know what it's going to operate like yet. This far down the path. So there's a bit of feedback that I think is fair from the community generally. It's with what we're seeing out there now, there's great disappointment, and not having anything to give them a sense of as to what may be coming down the road, I think is equally challenging as part of this project. Safety of the highway, paramount. I think we're all agreed on that, and flood protection were two of the key issues that surrounded this, but also with the fish passage, there's your dynamic of three, I guess, your big priorities. And, from a community standpoint, the appearance and or functionality of what we have there is the other challenge. So that's the reason I'm trying to get a sense of that, but I'll cease there. And if you have anything you want to add to that.
No, I really don't know what DFO is going to approve. I don't know if Alex or Rick has anything to add to the scenarios that are out there now, or kind of what we're anticipating, but we've been looking at lake levels, trying to have water there. And DFO is looking at more and more options, basically. If they're future operating options or if they're just alternatives or fallbacks, I'm not sure, right?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim. Colin Hines.
Thanks, Ken. I just had a question on timing from the construction phase. So if and when the Abateau gets approved, then the bridges have to be built. Are the bridges linked to the Abateau, or I'm assuming a bridge can be built faster than an Abateau can? I'm just wondering about the timelines for that highway part of it, or are the two linked closely together, or once the Abateau is approved, are they able to go ahead and start working on the bridges, which could possibly be built ahead of the Abateau?
So the bridges, you can kind of see it here in this diagram. The current high tide elevation is about 7.7, and the low point of the bridges as proposed is 7.9. So they're actually the bottom elevation is pretty close to the high tide. We are looking at phasing the construction so that they would be built at the same time as the future Abateau, but they wouldn't be protected by it. So it would accelerate our construction schedule, but we likely wouldn't allow traffic on there until we had that protection in front of them, just for safety reasons.
Okay, thank you.
That's it, Colin? I think so, yeah. Okay, Darren.
Yes. When you go back to the bridges thing, with a height of 7.94 meters, and you just built the halfway river causeway to 8 meters, 0.6 meters, a little higher. And the dikes in Wolfville, I believe, are at 8, and suggested to go up to 8.6 or 8.7. in 60 years. That's their recommendation by CBCL, I believe. If I'm wrong, correct me, please. Why would it be a safety concern for vehicles to go on a bridge that is 7.94 meters above the high tide mark now, when other infrastructure like Cobb Bridge, Halfway River Bridge, many other bridges are pretty close to 7.94? Why is it a problem in Windsor?
It's a bit of an issue of existing infrastructure and proposed engineering infrastructure of new stuff. We're aware those tides are there and there's a risk of storm surge. And with the bridge code, you're not supposed to have, forces on your girders. CBCL might be able to add a little addition to, what those tides are and some of those bridge code options. I'm not as familiar with the specific bridge code issues.
Yeah, well, the bridges are built as high as we can make them. Like 7.94 is the lowest point on the girders, but there's a depth that these bridges require for the structure. The top of them is being built at around elevation 12.5. And that elevation was identified by the geotechnical engineers as the maximum that we could build the embankments or, the dikes. At this time, because of the soft soils beneath. So these were put as high as we could get them. And the long span that we have, these bridges are each 90 meters in span, so around 300 feet in span, clear span, no piers. So therefore, that puts the bottom of the bridge quite close to the high tide level. So if you had a storm condition during the high tide, then there would be some risk to the bridges.
Okay, so when you did the railway thing, I think earlier in this presentation, you guys put in those, I think it was a railway thing, where you guys are beating those metal girders in that you beat in all over the province to shore up the sediment, like you do in the overpasses. And would that not, could that not be done?
Well, it would be the fact that these girders are 90 meters long, that, bridges aren't generally designed to be able to withstand the lateral forces that the water would put on the bridges in a flooded condition.
Okay, but would it not? So, okay, that's confusing to me. But it's not, it's above the high tide mark. That's only in like a, that would be like in a freak storm, you mean? Tidal wave thing?
It'd be when you get storm surge. So such in a hurricane or even, a significant wind storm that would drive the tide levels higher.
When's the last time you've seen the tide level at 7.9? I've not seen it there. I'm just wondering if it's marked somewhere besides the Saxby Gale.
Again, these structures are designed for what can happen. And just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it could happen tonight with the windstorm and rain that's supposed to be coming. So
I guess my final thing would be with the prediction capabilities we have in 2022. To a freak event, I just don't understand why we can't use the bridges when we could predict a major storm and potentially, we definitely could predict a storm surge. We'd see it coming, right, from way down the Bay of Fundy. So I'm just wondering, I'm just confused and perplexed. Thank you.
okay, well, I can't. The Nova Scotia Transportation, are responsible for the decisions that get made in terms of safety. So perhaps that could be answered, Mark, or something that could get back.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're looking at a multiple year construction phasing of an Abateau, the risk of having bridges that could be potentially inundated, potentially fail with the traveling public on them really just isn't an acceptable risk to the department. It's just not something we would pursue. If
Why
if
not
we're
change the bridge?
sorry,
Why not change the bridge then? Like, why not use a different design? I mean, we put bridge across the Gaspro River, the Shubenacadie River, the Kennecott River, PEI, Big Link. Why not change the type of bridge and put in those metal things that you put in the Halfway River, you put in for the railway crossings, you put in for the exits either side of Windsor? Why not build a proper bridge so we can alleviate this and get the highway built?
so like Rick is saying, the approach is the fill that's in the causeway area now is basically built to the maximum stable level. There's been material removed to help stabilize it, a tow berm. There's a whole process there. And the geotechnical engineers are saying, you know, if you go much higher than this, there's a risk of failure. So these bridges are basically built to that level. And if we could build them higher, I'd certainly be happy to, but that's not what we got back from our consultants.
No, I guess just to make sure, the last thing I'll leave alone. But that's why you guys use those metal things. What are they called? The things you beat down into the mud? The
Sheet piles?
Sheet piles. So if you were to use sheet piles, would those engineers say the same thing?
So I don't recall exactly all the measures they looked at for this, but sheet piles don't solve every issue. They don't make it necessarily stable at higher elevations. They can fail as well, right?
I guess for public safety, would it be something we could look forward to asking that question if sheet piles would solve the problem with this geotechnical situation, to get a highway twin, to get a highway going for safety issues? So we can get
Our structural designer's not with us tonight, but I know that various foundation options were looked at in the design. So the design that we have is the one that we feel is going to work.
A little note too about the depth. I remember the geotechnical analysis looked at slip circles. So when more weight is put on the top of that dike, it's not just the surface that fails, it would fail like to depths of 20 meters plus. So great big slip circles, and the whole ground would sort of level itself out, with the dike going down, another part further out going back up. The whole area underneath is very soft and you know, will not resist those shear forces that will allow the whole thing to slip and rotate out.
So in closing, could we check that out though? Just a simple question. Could we ask if those sheet pile things would solve that issue?
We've looked at, we've you know, sheet piles were part of the considerations for the foundations. Again, we actually are going to be using some sheet piling on as part of the dike construction adjacent to the bridges.
I mean, I'm sure we can extract that information from what's been done, and even just ask the question to our geotech guys to specifically get that information you're looking for there.
I think that's the resolution that would work here, so we could move on. Is that Darren just asked the question if it's a possibility and if it's been looked at, and you know, shouldn't be too hard to look to see what has been considered and bring that back. So if you guys could do that, that would be greatly appreciated. Colin, you have your hand up, but I don't think you mean to have your hand still up. I'll just ask in the room here, Sheldon, do you have any?
Yeah, I just had one, just sort of piggybacking a little bit on Jim's question about, you know, what we have there now being, you know, unsightly, I would say. Just curious, we have the fish studies going on. Do we have any data, or have they shared data at this point to say that what they're doing today has increased the abundance from a couple of years ago of fish, or has it been a net positive and net negative? Has that data been shared with anybody?
I'm not that aware of that data, but Darren Porter is very intimately involved with it, has been since 2017, looking at a good long time series now. And I think he'd be placed to answer that question.
All right, Sheldon, we've species like especially small body species like tom cod and to a small extent, well, smelt, they're passing now. They never passed before unless there was a title entry mistake. Very well recorded. Gasbro alewife, which is split into two group, alewife and river herring. They both have different spawning areas. Some will spawn in rivers, some spawn in more pools and or lakes. They're passing at exceptional levels, as you likely know. Everybody that's up in Falmouth can see. We've got striped bass passage, which we didn't have before. You have consistent passage, but the biggest thing that the data, from my understanding and what I see with my eyes, I'm showing you what I see with my eyes, but I drive a boat and I catch fish and they write it down and they record it and they put it together in papers. But what I see is downstream of the structure, there's no more depth downstream, which is something that people don't look at, but too much because it's out of sight. But there's consistent flows on a daily basis, twice a day, and they call them necessary flows in the legislation under section 34, 35 of the Fisheries Act that concerns the structure. And they're called necessary flows to sustain life or something to that effect. So what's happening now that wasn't happening is you have those flows and then you have a consistent stabilization of the downstream system and the downstream fish structures. So we have more fish coming to Windsor. We have more fish going through, without a doubt, in the data, especially with the year 2019. That wasn't a provincial study year. That was just, we got funding from Oceans North to survey that year. And that year we had 5 fish from salt water at Edgerma species past that structure before the 21st, 22nd, 23rd of May. I can't remember exactly what date in my memory. And we had 5 fish, 4 Gasbro and 1 striped bass. Because and that was only because they drew the lake down on the 7th, I believe, of May to try to do maintenance, but they couldn't because there was too much runoff coming downstream or something to that effect. So for a year like 2019, yes, massive. Now 2017, 2018, there is a difference in some species, especially tom cod and smelt, that's increased. But alewife and river herring were quite high in those 2 years because, as you probably remember, being the vice commodore, they drew the lake down 1st of April and they kept it down till July. It was a big problem for you guys. But they passed a lot of fish those 2 years. So it depended on the operation. So the problem with the Windsor Causeway is it wasn't operated consistently. Protocols were in place 15, 20 years ago, but they weren't followed always. There was always some, competing interests, different operators. So it's more consistent now. And the species of fish that aren't as strong as swimmers are passing on a regular basis now. And we're coming up to like the tom cod spawn run. So hopefully we'll be able to find those if I can continue this through Christmas, which I probably will. We'll try to find if they are spawning above, which would be exciting. It'd be nice to have some community help, actually. If there's anybody that's willing to go out during the period of 21st to say the 15th of January, which is when we predict is probably the time they'll spawn. And it would be nice to find them. If anybody's out and about and wants to go for a walk, they shouldn't be too hard to find if There's a bunch of them, and there seems to be quite a few getting through. But whether they spawn there or not, we don't know. This year would be nice to find out, but of course, Christmas time, it's hard to get help. So it'll probably be just me and my daughter. And but it'd be nice to have some other people, help. So I guess I hope I answered your question, Sheldon.
Well, not kind of, but not really. Curiosity was sort of, have we gotten increased, abundance in the system?
Yes.
And when I say the system, I mean through the Avon, not through, not whether fish are passing through the causeway, because really that's, in some ways that doesn't matter if you're not increasing the abundance of the fish in the entire system. So are you seeing more fish availability because they have more access to spawning areas in the Kennecook, in the St. Croix, in the various rivers around? Or is it just kind of neutral, or has what they've done right now with draining the lake and has that just really seen no increase, or maybe even a decrease? Because in a lot of cases upriver, as I'm sure you're aware, the spawning areas have kind of been cut off because the water level is too low for them to reach, especially the Gasbro, some of their former spawning areas through Falmouth and the lakes.
Well, we actually track the fish. We use different methods, from acoustics to pit tagging. We do visual surveys as well. Not just myself, Mi'kmaq Conservation Group, Katy University, and others. And the fish have reached every ground. Now, people's idea of spawning ground, you mentioned Gasbro. Gasbro have been all the way up through the system. We have 2 riffles built, which fish people can call them like a mitigation measure for Martok, which they were, but their proper name was they were riffles or fishways. So they were created to create the habitat, a lake-like habitat for fish species like alewife. So that's basically like little mini lakes up there now above the Martok, and you can continue to build them up through if you wanted to. Like you could do mitigation measures for Malcolm Manning. You go out to Oltons. You could do those riffles all the way up through those systems as well. So, but the Gasbro, we tracked them all the way up Mountain Road on that branch. We tracked them up the Allen Brook past Manning's. We tracked them all the way up to Kennecook past Baldwin's. We right out to the dam out Chester Road. So I mean, the Gasbro were making it. We actually seen a salmon out there, and we documented salmon inside. We found 2 very small baby salmon potentially. They're in getting they're for the first time in 50 years. They're in getting DNA testing right now. We caught 2 adults outside. We caught 2 adults inside. I mean, yeah, the abundance is increasing. It's not just fish neither. It's the ducks. I mean, there's nobody, shorebirds too, like the amount of semi-pollinated plovers and pipers, as well as, look at the ducks downtown Windsor. I mean, it's incredible the amount of wildlife down there right now. I mean, everybody can see it. I mean, whether you like it or not, it is increasing. I mean, we could put more water in if the province decided to do so. They did so for you back in 2020 when you wanted to put your wharf in 15th of June, I believe it was. I can't remember the exact date.
That's not true, Darren. You've been spouting that one for a while, but that's not true.
We got the salmon that day, and that is true.
I was there.
Yeah, exactly. You were there. You were there when you put the wharfs in. And that's right.
Yeah, but the water was not put in for us to put wharfs in, just to be clear. But anyway, so is the data there? Is the data clear to show there has been an increase in abundance with the draining of the lake?
Well, I'm not the guy that does the data. I told you what I see. You would have to bring Dr. Trevor Avery in, as well as the Mi'kmaq Conservation Group for those questions. But I can tell you, I've seen more fish now than I've ever seen. I'm a fisherman. I fish both sides of that causeway. I fish eels above it. I fish Gasbro below it and eels below it. I've seen an increase personally, but if you want an authority, somebody that has the credentials and initials behind their names, I would suggest you bring in Dr. Trevor Avery and or Mi'kmaq Conservation Group to give a presentation. That would be what I'd suggest, Sheldon.
I would suggest our council probably do that, to be honest. I think, given that there's been a major change, a major environmental change, which has, impacted the societal impacts or had societal impacts, which it was part of the stated purpose of this project was to minimize those. It would be interesting to know if those mitigation steps taken by DFO have had a positive impact on the system or not. You've got 2 years of data now, and I think, thank you for your team for doing that, Darren. I'm assuming it was funded. I hadn't realized that you were doing it on your own dime, but certainly good on you if that's what's happening. But at some point we have to look at whether, changes are actually having an effect. Like you said, there was, great success in 2019 and 2000, different years with certainly with Gaspereau passage.
Not 19 was a bad year.
Yeah, but I think we need to start looking at the data. There's been several years of data collection. What things are actually making a difference would be interesting to the entire system, not to, not whether fish get sucked through a gate because you're opening the drain and pulling them through, but because is there actually more abundance and more spawning areas? Is that actually having an effect on the abundance of fish in the area?
So why don't we, Bob, looks like Bob's going to speak.
I
just want to say,
make a couple of clarifications just for everybody here and Darren. We did pay for 2019. We have data 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Not government has only paid for 17 to 19 and 22. I granted, and I'm glad that you were able to secure funding for 20 and 21, 20 and 21. And Darren, you are going to get paid. An invoice, or not an invoice, but the budget did come into late, and you're going to get paid.
I'm not complaining, Bob. I'm just setting the record straight when people are trying to attack my living that I'm actually not getting paid for.
I don't think anybody.
Let's let Bob. He has the floor, so let's let him speak.
I'm sure nobody's attacking you personally for that, and we're glad that you're doing it. And I certainly am, and don't fear about that. But I personally don't think we have enough data for the whole system to say has there been change. You from your knowledge, it appears to be, but we don't have enough data collected on Western scientific methods to show that over, or at least over the last 5 years, that there's been a wholesale change across the whole system.
Exactly, and that's what I was saying. Like, if I don't speak for those people, I can tell you what I see personally. I suggest that if anybody has any technical questions, that they ask the doctor. You know what I mean? That would be the suggestion, right? I'm not the guy. At the end of the day, that does that statistics, right?
I'm glad that we'll try to arrange that.
So, yeah, okay, so that sounds good. Sheldon, we can try, at least investigate if we can get a presentation or on what's available as you're discussing. So can't resolve it here because they'll have to go and talk to people, but let's see if we can do that. Okay. There are no other hands up here that are nobody indicating. Is anybody here that wants to speak? Any questions? No. And there's no hands out in the ether. So I want to thank everybody for joining. As I said at the last couple of meetings, it's best I'll try to get this. We are recording this. We'll try and get it available on the website by tomorrow. I'll send a note out to everybody as soon as it's on, as I have in the past, everybody on the committee, and you can forward it on to people that are that you have contact with. For people who are, as I said, there's some people have come in and are in the gallery since we began. And I'll reiterate what I said earlier, that if you would like notice of the video of this meeting being on the website, let me know. Just give me your email address before you leave, and I'll make sure that you're notified as soon as that the video is available, in case you want to look at it or tell other people that it's available. With that, I want to thank everybody here and online, and the meeting is adjourned.